You're listening to the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, where we do fast, fun, free daily deep dives into books of the Bible. And right now, we're going through Esther.
I think the age of good superhero movies started before the Marvel shows with Robert Downey Jr. and Iron Man and all of that stuff. I think it started a little bit earlier with the Sam Raimi reboot of Spider-Man, sort of a reboot. There'd been other low-budget, silly, campy attempts, but it's like the technology in the early 2000s finally lent itself to trying out a good, proper superhero show. And I thought it was a blast. I really enjoyed that show when it came out. And probably part of the reason I liked it so much is because I was a young man and the memories of the social scene of high school and middle school were probably still pretty fresh in my brain. And so I really related to the gaining your powers, the origin story, Act 1 of that Spider-Man show, because Tobey Maguire takes a little bit of a beating. He gets picked on some, and then he gets bit by a spider. He gets superpowers. And then the bullies come around to beat him up again, but now, oh my, how the tables have turned. Now he's got superpowers and he can flip over things and see punches coming. And he's got super strength. And so he does it. He beats up his high school bully real good. And at first everybody's like, yeah, take that high school bully because you are the provocateur here. You're the problem. And then he doesn't quite know when to quit. He's really, really strong. And eventually the vibe kind of turns as people are watching. They're like, oh, okay, well, I'm not having as much fun now. He's a bully. That was really bad, but I'm uncomfortable with the retaliation. And I think likewise, that is a little bit how it feels to read Esther 9 for me. I can make a perfectly cohesive case from the Bronze Age and then the Iron Age about how the ancient world was, and I can follow the through line of theology and the Agagites and the Amalekites and their age-old rivalry with the Jewish people, and they did some really bad stuff to the Jewish people. And I can connect the dots with Saul and Saul failing to fully defeat the Amalekites, and then the bad blood that stews and ferments and turns nasty and clotted up and toxic by the time we get to the story that we're looking at now in the 5th century in Persia. I can connect all of those dots. I can do it academically. But the truth of the matter is that you need to know who you're dealing with. That's always been the deal as we work through the Bible together. I try to turn over my cards so that you can take my biases and my little cute emotions into account and just weigh that as you consider the conversation we're having. I have a tough time with Esther 9. It's not like I can't do it, but I kind of feel like Mary Jane in that Sam Raimi Spider-Man where the bully gets his comeuppance and I'm like, yes, thank you. But then a little bit it's like, but is that too much comeuppance? I don't know, because that level of vengeance and holy war is really foreign to me. And morally, it's like, I need a minute. And even if that is the obvious right thing that needed to happen or something, I still viscerally don't just resonate with it on that obvious justice level like I do some of the other stuff, like Haman, like his plot to kill Mordecai getting sniffed out and Haman having the tables turned on him and getting what was his. I don't feel any moral compunction about that whatsoever as I read it. I'm right with the Iron Age audience who was reading this document in the first place. And they're like, yeah, that was horrible. That had to happen. And it's amazing the way it worked out because it wasn't even really on Esther and Mordecai. You know, it's like the clean kill that you get in a PG or PG-13 movie where the bad guy obviously needs to get punished. Probably they need to die because they're never going to stop until the whole world is destroyed. But yeah, you don't want the good guy doing it. You don't want the good guy pulling the trigger, stomping on the fingers of the bad guy while they're hanging over the cliff. You want somebody who was in cahoots with the bad guy to do it, right? Somebody who was a part of it, but the bad guy mistreated him the whole time. And now that mistreated underling is finally like, no, you've gone too far. I stomp your feet. And they both go down together. Something like, I don't know, some kind of contrivance. You know the trope, the motif I'm talking about here, though, right? This is the one where there's no blood on the hands of the hero who fight to the very precipice of life and death with the bad guy and they have the upper hand, but the ultimate demise of the bad guy is totally the bad guy's fault and is totally a making of the bad guy's character and isn't born out of a ruthlessness or a heart bent on revenge on the part of the good guy. And if you ended this book that we've been reading together right at the beginning of chapter 9, I think you kind of get that. Like, this had to be stopped. I mean, it's easy. It's pretty easy. But it goes on into chapter 9, and the horrors of the violence of this age of warfare and even holy war become more evident with each line. And at least to me, as we move forward into the next stuff, it reads like the original author is not in any way grossed out by this. They're viewing it as a complete win in every way, and they're not feeling any pressure to explain this really bloody victory. What we're going to see is even a double down bloody victory for the Jews, for Mordecai and Esther. There isn't any need to explain it to the audience or morally qualify it. The author anticipates that the audience, including probably a secular audience, is going to be like, yeah, obviously. And that was how it needed to be. Again, sensibilities change over time, and I think it's absolutely okay to feel friction or just not automatic resonance with every single aspect of every story that we read in the Bible. And anywhere we run into that hesitation or pause, probably just good cause for us to think harder about what's there to try to understand the story that much better. So I guess that's kind of my warm-up there, my little opening statement for everything that we're going to see in the next several episodes, as this turns out to not just be a successful Jewish repulsion of Haman and his ilk and the ill intent that they had for this day of blood that they marked on the calendar. No, it's a lot more than just a successful repulsion of their attacks. The enemies of the Jews are going to get completely defeated, and then they're going to double down on it for a second day and defeat them even harder. And it's possible that as you read this and you work through it with me, that you might feel that Mary Jane in the hallway in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man moment where you're like, whoa, wow, now that might actually be a tiny bit too much for the bully to get. It's possible that you're going to look at that and everything else we've looked at, and you're going to be like, well, I don't know, it's ancient holy war, and this thing was always going to be sort of a zero-sum game, and that you'll read it different than I do. I'm not trying to tell you that you need to feel any particular emotion about it. I'm trying to disclose my own. I believe there is an obvious religious element to this. I know we talked about that a ton, but it looks to me like there's also a political element to this that is not that hard to detect as we read between the lines here. In a lot of ways, it feels like we're past the high drama part of the story, and now we're kind of into the mop-up, obvious consequences of the high drama part, and we'll continue to unpack that over the next few days. All right, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.